Tonight we step through the drizzle and wood smoke into a place that no GPS can quite locate, a Saxon village caught somewhere between frost and spring, where everything smells faintly of yeast, mead, and burning oak. The moon is low, a tarnished coin above the thatch, and you're standing ankle-deep in mud, clutching a scrap of parchment that claims to hold the lost recipes for Saxon honey cakes. You probably won't survive this, at least not without sticky fingers and singed eyebrows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the creaking door of a timber hall, and the heat hits like a slow wave. Inside, every sound is muffled by the crackle of the hearth and the low hum of a dozen voices telling stories older than ink. On a rough wooden table, someone is ladling thick, golden batter into round clay molds. The smell, oh, it's a syrupy dream of meadow flowers, smoke, and warm grain. The kind of scent that wraps around your throat like a scarf. You edge closer, trying not to trip over a stray piglet. A woman in a woolen shawl gives you the side eye but doesn't stop stirring. She uses a flat stone to scrape the edges of her pan, the batter hissing as it meets the iron. You watch droplets of honey caramelize in the heat, tiny comets of sweetness bursting into brown. This, you realize, is not just cooking. It's an act of worship. In early Saxon belief, bread wasn't only food, it was an offering to the gods. The cakes that sweetened their tables were also laid on altars to Woden, Fries, and the household wights who guarded the hearth. A mainstream historical fact for you. The earliest written mention of honey cakes in the British Isles comes from monastic notes describing Laughtmass, loaves baked for Lammas, the harvest festival. But here, centuries before parchment and Latinized prayers, it's still something raw and holy. You reach out, careful, watching as the woman sprinkles crushed herbs into the batter. "Time," you whisper. She laughs softly, a sound like fire popping. "No," she says. "Something wilder." That's the first hint of mystery, the scent that doesn't belong to thyme, sage, or mint. It smells like woodland after rain and the inside of a beehive. Historians still argue whether such herbs were used for flavor or for spells. Some claim they symbolized fertility, others think they simply masked the taste of smoke. But tonight, the question feels unnecessary. The kitchen itself is a spell. Outside, through the cracks in the shutter, you glimpse figures moving under torchlight, beekeepers tending hives carved into fallen logs. They hum low songs to keep the bees calm. You wonder if that works, or if it's just an excuse to sing when the night feels too wide. The honey they carry inside gleams darker than gold. Not the supermarket amber you're used to, it's nearly mahogany, thick as syrup left on the stove too long. You dip your finger in a cooling pot and taste it. It's earthy, smoky, with a strange tang, like wildflowers soaked in fire. The woman grins. "Forest honey," she says proudly. "Our bees know secrets the monks never will." A fringe tidbit for your bedtime brain. Early Saxon beekeepers sometimes buried small cakes near hives to feed the bees' spirits, believing it ensured sweeter honey. Some even swore that bees carried souls between worlds. Imagine that, tiny, fuzzy psychopomps buzzing around your picnic. The hall grows louder. A man strums a lyre made from gut strings and an old tortoise shell. Children chase each other with scraps of dough, laughing, and the smell of baking fills the gaps where language would fail. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, not from boredom but from warmth. You glance down at your parchment recipe, the ink smudged and curling at the edges. It mentions hlefseekhemed mid-hunig, cake bread kissed with honey, but the quantities are nonsense. 2 drops of moonlight, a handful of breath. Clearly, this recipe was written by someone either drunk, poetic, or both. Still, as you watch the first honey cake lifted from the iron pan, something clicks. The crust glows a shade between bronze and amber, the center puffed soft as moss. The woman breaks it in half and offers you a piece. You bite. The taste is both strange and familiar, like a memory of something your ancestors once ate on a long-forgotten feast day. There's barley flour here, definitely. Maybe a bit of mashed apple, for moisture. But there's also something floral, faintly spicy, like burnt heather or fennel pollen. Your tongue tingles. The woman wipes her hands on her apron and nods toward the parchment in your pocket. You're after the lost recipe, aren't you? You nod, crumbs sticking to your lip. She chuckles. Then you've already tasted part of it. The rest, well, you'll have to follow the bees. A sudden gust of wind rattles the shutters, and a bit of ash flutters down from the rafters like black snow. The lyre's song falters, replaced by the sound of rain thickening outside. Someone mutters a quick charm to keep the hearth fire from sputtering. You remember that cheeky warning from earlier, you probably won't survive this, and realize it might apply to curiosity as well. Because in this place, recipes aren't written in ink but traded like gossip, guarded like treasure. And once you start asking questions about honey and gods, the world has a habit of answering in riddles. Still, you can't help it. The taste of that cake has hooked you. Sweetness with the depth of smoke, warmth that hums under your tongue like a hive at dusk. Somewhere beyond the hall, a beekeeper's song fades into the night. You follow it out, into the mist, the air alive with the low drone of wings. The forest hums back, and you realize the journey is only beginning. The lost recipe not just something you'll taste, but something that will ask you to remember. The rain turns the path to shining mud as you walk toward the dark trees, your breath fogging in the lantern light. You glance back once, at the golden glow of the hall, and then step forward into the humming dark. The rain quiets as you cross into the trees, and the sound that replaces it is stranger. Thousands of faint, wet wings, like whispers stitched through leaves. The forest feels alive, the kind of alive that doesn't need witnesses. You duck under a crooked oak, its bark knotted with pale fungi, and there, set into a hollow trunk, you spot the first hive. It's carved from wood, sealed with clay, and streaked with candle drips. The smell is unmistakable, smoke, beeswax, and that same raw sweetness from the hall. You hear a crunch behind you. Turning, you spot an old man carrying a basket, the wicker wet and sagging. His tunic is patched with bits of leather and, bizarrely, feathers tied at the shoulder. You're far from your hearth, he says, not unkindly. Following the bees, are you? You nod, and he smiles, a grin missing more teeth than it keeps. Then you're chasing bread for the gods. He gestures for you to follow him deeper into the woods. The path shrinks to a thread between bracken and roots, but you manage. The man moves with the patience of someone who knows the ground will always be there when he steps. He hums under his breath, a slow tune that somehow keeps the bees calm as he checks the hive. Smoke curls from a little pot of smoldering moss in his hand, and he waves it gently, murmuring words that sound like half prayer, half gossip. He draws out a chunk of honeycomb the size of your palm. It gleams like amber glass, dripping golden syrup down his wrist. He breaks off a piece and offers it. For the gods, he says. And for you, if you're quick. You hesitate, he might mean that literally, but curiosity wins again. The taste is outrageous, bright, floral, with something faintly herbal hiding beneath. Heather honey, he says, reading your face. Strong stuff. The old people believed Wooden himself drank it before battle. That's your historical anchor. The Saxons did, in fact, use honey cakes as ritual offerings to the gods, especially during blots, seasonal feasts for prosperity and fertility. Archaeologists have found burned fragments of what might have been cakes mixed with grain and honey in ancient fire pits. Though, as the old man would say, Historians still argue whether those bits were food or just lucky fuel tossed into the flames. You walk with him to a small clearing where a stone altar squats under moss, slick and green. It's ringed with bee boxes, each etched with strange little marks, half runes, half doodles. The man crouches and places a piece of honeycomb on the stone, humming low again. Then, from his basket, he draws something that looks like bread but smells of incense and yeast. It's a small, round cake, golden brown, with a cross scored across the top, not the Christian cross yet, just an equal arm charm mark. He sets it beside the honeycomb. "For the Sky Father," he whispers. "And for the spirits who keep the hives full." You feel the weight of it, this idea that baking could be an act of magic. The air here doesn't just smell sweet, it feels charged, as if the bees themselves are listening. The old man looks at you again, his eyes pale and bright. "You came for recipes. You'll find them written in smoke and patience. We bake not to feed the belly, but the world." You think about that as he tends his little altar. Maybe the lost recipes were never lost, just buried under the noise of centuries, replaced by measurements and precision. Maybe they were about gestures instead of grams. Still, your curiosity pokes at the edges. "How did they make them?" you ask. "These cakes for the gods?" He chuckles. "With barley or rye flour, sometimes spelt. Always honey, never sugar. And sometimes blood." You pause. "Wait, blood?" "Just a drop," he says, waving it away. "For luck. Or for remembrance. Depends who you ask." That's your fringe tidbit tonight. A few ritual bread recipes across Old Germanic and early Saxon texts mention a trace of animal blood, symbolic of vitality. Some scholars think it was superstition. Others suggest it added iron or acted as a binding agent. Still others, my favorite group, argue the scribes were just dramatizing their grocery lists. As you chew on that unsettling fact, the man straightens. "It's not just food," he says again. "It's a promise." He gestures toward the sky. "Each cake keeps the sun turning. That's why it's round. You eat half, you burn half. You give what you take." He presses a still warm honey cake into your hand. The crust is firm but the center yields like soft fruit. Steam rises, carrying that same mysterious herb scent you can't name. "Eat," he says. "It remembers things you've forgotten." You bite. It's even better than before. Deeply sweet, earthy, smoky, alive. And beneath the sugar, something haunting. You can't tell if it's just the taste of ancient grain, or if the cake itself is humming faintly in your palm. When you open your eyes, the old man is gone. Only the buzzing remains. You look down at your hand, the crumbs glitter faintly in the low light, as if dusted with pollen or gold. The trees seem to lean closer, listening. You kneel beside the stone altar, brushing aside a patch of moss, and find another mark carved there, 3 interlocking spirals. You recognize it vaguely from a museum plaque, some ancient symbol for cycles or renewal. You trace it with your fingertip, and the air stirs. A gust sweeps through the clearing, scattering leaves, and suddenly you smell something new. Baking bread, even though there's no oven here. That's when it hits you. This isn't just about ingredients. The recipe is part map, part myth. As you head back toward the village, lanterns swinging at your side, your fingers still sticky with honey, you can almost hear faint laughter on the wind, the beekeeper's voice, teasing, "Bread for the gods, traveler. Don't forget to share." You tuck a small crumb into your pocket anyway, because you know better than to walk away empty-handed. And besides, something tells you this crumb might just show you where to look next. By dawn, the mist has pulled itself apart like wool, and the forest hum has thinned to a sleepy buzz. You've followed the beekeeper's trail to the edge of a stream where reeds bow low and white blossoms float like spilled milk. There's a soft sweetness in the air, lighter than honey, heavier than rain. Ahead, the path climbs toward a low stone wall and a scattering of thatched huts huddled around a chapel. The sign of the cross marks the doorway, but carved bees flank it on either side. A monk appears, cloaked in brown, his sandals splashed with dew. He carries a clay pot cradled in both hands as if it might fly away. His beard is streaked with gold. No, not metal, but pollen. When he spots you, he lifts a finger to his lips. Quiet, he whispers. They're listening. You glance around for they, but see only the hives, dozens of woven skeps lined up against the chapel wall, each draped with linen to keep out the damp. The hum that fills the air sounds like organ music played from under the earth. The monk beckons you closer, uncovering one of the hives. Inside, the comb glistens wet as amber glass. They are temperamental today, he murmurs. Storm coming, perhaps. Or visitors who ask too many questions. You blink. I just wanted to learn about the honey cakes. Ah, he says, amused. Then you already asking too many questions. He leads you inside the chapel, which smells not of incense but of smoke, wax, and bread. The altar is simple, stone, worn smooth by elbows, but beside it sits a large brass pan, blackened by use. On a nearby table, open scrolls are pinned with river stones. The script isn't Latin. It's a jumble of runes, small bees inked in the margins. The monk sets down his pot and begins stirring its contents with a carved spoon. The mixture gleams like sunlight trapped in liquid. Forest honey, he explains, mixed with ash from the hearth and a drop of mead. The sweetness is less important than the memory it carries. You lean over the table. You keep bees for the monastery. He nods. We were told to tend them by Saint Dominic himself, brought the first hives to Ireland, so the story goes. Bees followed him everywhere, even across the sea. They say he left one hive behind, and it grew into the forest. He looks at you, eyes bright. Perhaps you've just walked through it. That's your historical fact for the night. Saint Dominic, an Irish monk from the 6th century, was indeed credited with bringing beekeeping to the British Isles. Whether bees literally followed his ship or that's just a sweet exaggeration, historians still argue whether the tale is miracle or metaphor. You watch as the monk pours the glowing honey mixture over a handful of crushed herbs. The scent rises, lavender, meadowsweet, and something darker, like resin scraped from pine bark. He hums quietly, a tune you can't place, something halfway between a lullaby and a work song. These herbs, he says, are for memory. Bees remember flowers that bloom only once a year. We remember harvests that come once in a lifetime. The honey binds both kinds of remembering. He sets aside his bowl and opens a wooden box. Inside are small discs of what might be bread, or relics, you can't tell. Each one stamped with the faint outline of a bee. This, he says softly, is the beekeeper's secret. He hands one to you. The surface is glazed, sticky even after all these centuries. You bring it to your nose. It smells faintly medicinal, like thyme and smoke, but sweeter underneath. You eat them, you ask. Not often, he says. Mostly, we burn them. You blink. Burn them. He smiles. Everything sweet belongs first to the fire. The old gods liked it that way, and we never truly stopped honoring them. We just changed the names. That's your fringe tidbit. For a few centuries after Christianization, monks quietly adapted pagan offerings into new feast day traditions. Honey cakes once meant for wooden or frieze became offerings for saints instead. Different prayers, same recipes. It's historical sleight of hand by way of sugar. The monk gestures for you to follow him out to the garden. Watch, he says. The hives will show you how. Outside, the morning light has thickened to gold, catching on every dewdrop and blade of grass. Bees drift between flowers with slow, deliberate grace. Each one knows where to go, the monk murmurs. They dance their directions in the dark, tiny mathematicians mapping paradise. He glances at you. You ever tried reading their dances? You shake your head. He laughs softly. Good. You'd lose your mind. You kneel beside a hive, listening. The sound isn't random, it rises and falls like a breath, almost patterned. You start to imagine its language. Maybe the first recipe you'll ever hear that isn't written down. The monk crouches beside you, whispering, "We keep their honey for healing and for blessing bread." A drop on the tongue, and the words come easier. Maybe that's why monks wrote so much. Sticky fingers, sweeter thoughts. He dips a fingertip into the honey pot and marks a tiny rune on your wrist, a spiral. For remembrance, he says. So you won't lose the path. You feel the tacky warmth sink into your skin. The forest seems to glow again, faintly. As he stands, you catch sight of something under the altar, a parchment wrapped in beeswax cloth. The monk notices your gaze and sighs. That, he admits, is what's left of the recipe book. The rest was eaten by mice, or time, or both. You raise an eyebrow. Can I see it? He hesitates, then nods. If you promise to return it when you wake. He hands it to you. Inside are smudged ink lines and faded illustrations of cakes, herbs, and bees. But one phrase stands out, written in firmer hand. Mel sanctum est lingua Dei, honey is the tongue of God. You look up to ask what it means, but the monk is already walking away, back toward his hives. The air thickens with the hum again, and the light grows so bright it almost hurts to keep your eyes open. When you blink, he's gone. Only the empty hives remain, humming softly as if they remember you. You turn the phrase over in your mind, tracing the rune on your wrist. Maybe this is the secret the bearded monk spoke of, not an ingredient, but a way of listening. You pocket the wax-wrapped parchment and step back onto the path, the forest opening before you like an exhale. You have part of the recipe now, but something tells you it's missing a flavor the monks couldn't name. Something wild, untamed, and maybe even dangerous. And as your stomach growls softly, you realize the next clue might be waiting where the feasts grow loudest, where mead spills faster than secrets. The next evening, you find yourself trudging along a muddy track that winds away from the chapel and toward the distant thrum of music and laughter. The parchment the monk gave you weighs warm against your chest, beeswax softening in your pocket. Ahead, the woods thin into pastureland and the sound of a river. Lanterns bob like amber fireflies in the dark, leading to a great timber hall that rises above the reeds. Smoke curls from its roof vents, and the scent, oh, that scent, honey, spice, and singed flour, pulls you onward like a leash. Inside, the place is alive with chaos. Dogs chase scraps under benches, a minstrel plucks at a lyre near the hearth. Someone somewhere has already fallen asleep mid-toast. The heat smells of ale and candle wax. At the long central table, cooks are passing bowls and pounding dough, arguing in a cheerful roar. You edge closer and spot a broad-shouldered man in a red cloak directing them. His hair's threaded with gray, and his voice booms like a drum. No. More fennel. Less smoke. Do you want the gods coughing through supper? He spots you hovering and waves you over. Traveler, you've got the look of someone who knows their honey. Come, taste. You hesitate, but before you can object, a wooden spoon is thrust at you, piled with something pale and sticky. You taste, and the world narrows to sweetness and spice. Cinnamon? No, older. Something sharper and more resinous, biting at the edges of the tongue. You can't name it, and that's what makes your pulse jump. The man grins. You don't know, do you? That's the lost ingredient. Or so the cooks say. He lowers his voice. They call it sunroot dust. Comes from far-off traders down the river routes. Or maybe from nowhere at all. And there it is, the lost ingredient you've been chasing, teased into existence by rumor and flavor. Some say it was ground from dried petals of a yellow flower that no longer grows. Others claim it was amber ash, crushed fossil resin, burnt and sifted. Historians still argue whether sunroot ever existed, or whether it was a poetic stand-in for anything exotic and expensive enough to brag about. You dip the spoon again, half for science, half for greed. Whatever it is, the taste shifts as you breathe, warm at first, then cooling, like honey stirred with mint smoke. The red-cloaked cook claps your shoulder. Careful. Some say it brings dreams. Dreams. He nods. The kind that remember themselves. You eat too much, you'll start seeing the gods at breakfast. You glance around, suddenly aware that every cook here seems to have the same honey-dusted fingers, the same amused gleam in their eyes. Someone brings over a platter of round cakes, crisped at the edges, glowing in the firelight. The smell is unbearable, sweet, buttery, with a faint tang of wood smoke. They set one before you. The cook gestures grandly. Eat. Tell me if you taste the sun. You break the cake open. The inside steams, soft and golden. You bite, and it's perfect. The sweetness lands first, followed by the whisper of spice and a faint mineral bitterness, as if someone baked sunlight into clay. It's like memory and warmth. You manage. He laughs. Exactly. The secret is the honey and the ash. Everything worth tasting has a little burn to it. There's your mainstream historical fact. In early Saxon and Norse baking, ashes from specific woods, oak, hazel, or willow, were sometimes mixed into doughs. It gave a faint alkaline tang and supposedly helped preserve bread. The ash of burned herbs or resin might have carried scent, too. That could well be the sunroot dust everyone spoke of, a flavor born from smoke and ritual. The cook motions for you to follow him to a smaller back room, quieter, dimly lit by a single tallow candle. He pulls out a box carved with runes. Inside are small cloth pouches filled with a faintly glowing powder. Trade secret, he says, eyes glinting. But the monks call it heresy. They think sweetness should stay pure. You smirk. And you disagree. He grins back. Purities for saints. Flavors for mortals. You can't help laughing. He pours a pinch of the powder into your palm. It glitters faintly, catching the light like ground amber. You bring it to your nose, smoke, honey, pine, and something floral you can't quite place. The smell makes your head swim. Where did it come from, you ask? He leans close, lowering his voice. From before. Before ink, before prayer, before bread even had names. The first beekeepers traded it in whispers. But the recipe was lost when the river silted and the traders vanished. You pocket a pinch, just in case. And you? He shrugs. I just guess. Every generation adds its own guess. That's how flavor survives. The minstrel out in the hall starts a new song, something rollicking about mead and mischief. The cook straightens. You should go see the feast. They'll be toasting the bees soon. You step back into the warmth of the main hall. Torches flare. Horns of mead clink. Someone raises a loaf in mock salute to the rafters. You catch only fragments of the toast. For the bees who never sleep, for the bread that never burns, for the sweetness that binds us all. The crowd roars approval. Honey glints on every lip. The air feels drunk on sugar. A few crumbs fall to the floor, landing near the hearth. A dog licks them up, tail wagging like it's been blessed. You can't help smiling. The cook winks from across the room and mouths, "Flavor survives." Later, when the laughter has turned to snores and the torches have dimmed, you sit by the dying fire, nibbling the last of your honey cake. The taste has changed again, cooler now, faintly metallic. You glance into the embers and swear they flower a little brighter. Maybe the old man in the forest was right. The recipe isn't just food. It's an offering, a memory made edible. And maybe the missing ingredient isn't sunroot or ash. It's the part of you that listens when something ancient hums through the dark. As the last ember fades, you tuck your pinch of powder deeper into your pocket, next to the waxed parchment. The hum of bees drifts through your half-dream, though you're miles from the hives. Outside, the river murmurs softly against the bank, and you can almost swear it's whispering a recipe. Not in words, but in rhythm, slow, deliberate, patient. The kind of rhythm that might teach you how to taste time itself. You wake to sunlight dripping through the shutters and the faint sound of laughter carried by wind. The hall smells of spilled mead and cooling ash, a perfume of chaos after joy. Someone snores in the corner, someone else is still arguing with a dream. You stretch, stiff from the wooden bench, and notice your fingers still faintly golden from honey. It's not just a stain, it feels almost like the sweetness has soaked into your skin. Outside, the world is wet and bright. Dew beads the grass, and a few chickens scratch near overturned cups from last night's feast. Across the yard, voices rise again, sharper this time, teasing. You wander toward them, drawn by the promise of fresh bread and mischief. By the riverbank, a group of young men are gathered around a barrel. One of them, a tall, ruddy fellow with hair like barley, waves you over. "Traveler, you survived the feast. Good omen. Come drink the morning." He thrusts a cup into your hand. The liquid inside shimmers faintly. Mead, golden, thick, and buzzing with life. You take a sip, and it's like swallowing sunlight through smoke. Sweet first, then sharp, like laughter with teeth. The man laughs at your face. "Careful. That batch was brewed with wild honey. The bees that made it stung 2 monks and a pig before we bottled it." That's your mainstream historical fact tonight. Mead, the fermented drink of honey and water, was central to Saxon feasting culture. It wasn't just for fun, it was sacred. Every toast was a tiny prayer for fortune, every cup a contract. The Old English word symbol meant both feast and ritual, meaning you couldn't get drunk without also, somehow, talking to the gods. The ruddy man slaps your back. We brew it for courage, for laughter, and sometimes for apologies. Someone beside him snickers. Mostly apologies. You grin. And do you bake honey cakes to go with it? The group exchanges glances, conspiratorial. One nods toward a covered basket by the river. Aye. The honey's from the hives near the old oak. But, he leans closer, these cakes have mischief in them. You raise an eyebrow. Mischief. He grins. Try one. You lift the cloth. Inside are small, dark cakes dusted with something sparkly. Sugar? No, it's crushed pollen mixed with ash. You take a cautious bite. The flavor boasts. Bittersweet, smoky, tangy, and then oddly numbing. Your lips tingle. What did you put in this? You ask, half laughing. He shrugs. A bit of the brewer's mash, a bit of wildflower dust, and, he pauses dramatically, a splash of last year's mead. You blink. You bake with alcohol. Of course, he says, mock offended. Makes the gods loosen their tongues. Or so we tell ourselves. He's not wrong, historically. Some Anglo-Saxon recipes mention mixing fermented drinks into bread dough, usually ale, but occasionally mead. The yeast made things rise faster, and the flavor carried a kind of fire. You sit on a flat rock by the water, chewing slowly as the men resume their game, throwing small stones into the current, trying to hit floating cups from last night's revel. The loser must drink whatever remains in their cup, river water included. It's absurd, and it's wonderful. Someone breaks into a song about a fox stealing honeycomb from a sleeping bear. The lyrics make no sense and all the sense in the world. Between laughter and sips, the conversation drifts towards stories. Did you know, says the youngest, that bees once built their hives in skulls? That's nonsense, says another. They prefer hollow trees. Historians still argue whether, you murmur teasingly, they mean that literally or as a metaphor for rebirth. The group looks at you in surprise, then bursts out laughing. Aye. You speak like a monk with ale in his beard. You grin, half proud, half tipsy. The mead is working fast. As the morning drifts on, one of the men leans closer. If you truly want to learn the lost recipe, he says, you must ask the hearth mistress. She knows more than any of us fools. The woman from the hall. He nods. Aye. Her cakes never burn, even when the fire's too hot. Some say she keeps bees in her kitchen rafters, whispering secrets to her dough. You laugh, but something in his tone lingers. There's reverence there, and maybe fear. Where can I find her? Follow the smoke, he says simply. And bring honey. She doesn't speak to empty hands. The group toasts you as you stand. May your cake rise and your bees never sting, someone shouts. You head back toward the village, a little dizzy from sunlight and laughter. The path is littered with the aftermath of celebration. Broken cups, wilted garlands, a sticky patch of spilled honey that the bees are already reclaiming. A small boy runs past chasing one with a stick. Don't, you call after him. They remember faces. He pauses, startled, then grins and runs anyway. That's another half-truth from old folklore. Saxons believed bees held grudges, or blessings. If you insulted a hive, the whole swarm might abandon you. But if you sang to them kindly, they'd forgive nearly anything. You reach the edge of the village again, the same warm hum returning to the air. Smoke rises from one chimney thicker than the rest, curling into the shape of a question mark. You smile. The hearth mistress is waiting. Before you step through her doorway, you glance once more at the river. The men are still laughing, still flinging pebbles, still caught between reverence and ridiculousness. That, you realize, is the real Saxon recipe, half devotion, half disaster. Honey and fire, prayer and spilled drink. The thought makes you laugh softly to yourself as you knock on the door. Somewhere inside, a spoon clatters against a bowl, and a woman's voice calls, "If you're selling nonsense, I've already baked some. Come in." And with that, the next chapter of the recipe begins, less divine, more domestic, but no less dangerous. The hearth mistress stands at the center of her kitchen like a storm that learned manners. Her sleeves are rolled high, her hair bound in a kerchief so worn it could probably tell its own stories. The air hums with warmth and the faint, irresistible scent of roasting grain. Wooden spoons, clay jars, and copper pots hang from beams darkened by years of smoke. "You've brought honey, haven't you?" she says without turning around. You hold up the small jar you carried from the feast. The finest from the oak grove hives. She glances over her shoulder, eyes sharp as flint. "We'll see about that." You follow her motion to a low table covered with ingredients, flour ground coarse as sand, a bowl of yellow butter softening near the hearth, and a jug of mead whose cork seems one strong sigh away from surrender. "Sit," she says. "If you're after the old recipe, You'll work for it. Words are cheap. Honey's not. You sit, half amused, half nervous. Her kitchen feels alive, not just with fire, but with purpose. You can hear bees faintly buzzing outside, the kind of steady rhythm that sounds like time itself counting in golden drops. She begins by mixing flour with crushed hazelnuts. You know why Saxons prized honey? She asks. You shake your head. It never spoils, she says, kneading with deliberate force. They found jars in Egyptian tombs still sweet after 1,000 years. Imagine that, something that laughs at time. That's your historical fact tonight. Honey was not only a sweetener but also a preservative. Anglo-Saxons used it to store fruits, glaze meats, and heal wounds. It was as much medicine as food. And yet, she continues, we used to waste it on kings' tables, pretending it was just dessert. You grin. Seems you've strong opinions about royalty. Strong opinions about waste, she corrects. You've never been poor enough to scrape sweetness off a bee's wings. There's a pause, filled by the crackle of fire and the scrape of wood against clay. Then, she adds something unexpected, a pinch of dried herbs, green-gray and sharp-smelling. What's that, you ask? Hyssop, she says. Good for the chest. The monks grow it, but I steal some when I can. Adds bite. Hyssop in honey cake. That's new. You file it away. She gestures for you to stir the batter. It's thicker than you expect, heavy and sticky. You'll need strength, she mutters, smirking slightly. The dough should resist you. That's how you know it's alive. As you mix, she begins a story in a tone halfway between gossip and sermon. There was once a baker near Winchester who swore the bees spoke Latin. Said they answered the bell for mass. You chuckle. Historians still argue whether he meant that literally or just poetically. She raises an eyebrow. You've read too many monks. You keep stirring, arms aching pleasantly. The batter smells faintly of nuts and flowers, like spring disguised as bread. Tell me something, you say. Why did your people hide their recipes? If they were so good, wouldn't they want them remembered? Her expression softens, a flicker of sorrow crossing it. Because sweetness makes people foolish. They'll steal it, twist it, turn it into something cruel. Better some things go quiet for a while. You pause mid-stir. Cruel? How can cake be cruel? She doesn't answer directly. Instead, she dips a spoon into the batter and lets a small drop fall into the fire. It hisses, sparks, and vanishes. Everything alive has spirit. When we bake, we feed that spirit. When we forget respect, the sweetness turns bitter. A little shiver creeps up your arms. It's the same strange superstition you've heard whispered among the villagers, that a honey cake made with greed instead of gratitude would never rise. She must see the unease in your face, because her tone softens again. Don't look so spooked. We're not witches, just cooks who listen. You smile faintly. And what do the cakes say? Depends on the day, she says with a shrug. Sometimes they ask for patience. Sometimes for less talking and more stirring. You laugh, and she smiles despite herself. When the batter is ready, she ladles it into shallow wooden molds. The shapes are simple, rounds, hearts, a few crude animal forms. In the old days, she says, we carved runes into the tops. A blessing for luck, or for love, or to keep away unwanted suitors. That last one might sell well on the modern market, you joke. She chuckles. Aye. If only honey worked on men's sense as well as their tongues. As she slides the trays toward the fire, the smell deepens into something rich, ancient, irresistible. It's as though warmth itself has flavor. Outside, rain begins to fall, soft and steady. The sound mingles with the crackling fire, the steady hum of bees sheltering in their hives, and your own heartbeat, slow and calm. She pours you a cup of something hot and golden, probably mead, but thinner, spiced with herbs. Drink, she says. For patience. The cakes will tell us when they are ready. You sip. The flavor is strange but soothing, honey, mint, and a whisper of smoke. The world feels hazy at the edges, as though time has stretched itself thin and you're sitting somewhere between centuries. While you wait, she sits opposite you and begins to hum an old tune. No words, just melody, low, looping, hypnotic. My grandmother said bees dance to this song, she says. If you hum while baking, the spirit in the dough won't fall asleep. You hum with her, half amused, half entranced. When she finally lifts the lid of the small clay oven, the scent that bursts out is almost holy. You lean forward, breath caught. The cakes are golden brown, edges caramelized, centers glistening faintly. You take one, break it open, and steam curls up like a sigh. The texture is dense but tender. You taste, and for a moment, everything else fades. The rain, the room, even your heartbeat. Just sweetness, earth, and something hauntingly floral. The hearth mistress watches your expression and nods. Now you understand why it's dangerous, she says quietly. Because if you taste something like that, you'll never settle for less again. And just like that, you do understand. The lost recipe isn't only about ingredients, it's about memory, about the way flavor holds time still. You look at her, ready to ask for the full recipe, but she shakes her head. Not yet. You've learned the first part, patience. Come back at dawn. The rest must be mixed by light, not fire. You nod, reluctantly standing. Outside, the rain smells like honey on stone. The air hums again, not bees this time, but something quieter, closer. The sweetness of waiting. The rain has faded by the time you step outside, leaving the world slick and shining, as though the earth has just been varnished with honey. A mist clings to the thatched roofs, curling like slow smoke. Somewhere behind you, the hearth mistress hums again, her voice fading under the creak of her door closing. You wander through the quiet village. Everything smells of wet ash and flowers. A few villagers are up already, women wringing out damp wool, a boy sweeping puddles from a doorway with a broom twice his height. They nod when you pass, as if you belong here now. You're still holding half of one honey cake in your hand. Cold now, but no less rich. You take another bite, and it feels different, like eating history in slow motion. Each crumb seems to dissolve into memory. You find yourself drawn back toward the meadows behind the hall, where the air buzzes faintly again. The rain has only made the flowers bolder, yellow buttercups, white clover, purple thistle. The bees are back, moving lazily from bloom to bloom. You kneel beside one, watching the small miracle unfold. Its legs dusted with pollen, wings trembling like glass. You wonder if it's one of the same bees whose honey flavored your breakfast. It doesn't seem to care that you're there, it's too busy doing the work of ages. That's tonight's historical fact. Anglo-Saxon beekeeping was both common and revered. Beekeepers, often monks or widows, kept skeps made of woven straw, sometimes covered in mud or clay for warmth. Bees were property, even taxable wealth. And yet, they were treated with strange, tender reverence. You remember something the hearth mistress said, everything alive has spirit. Maybe that's why. From somewhere behind you, a voice says softly, you shouldn't kneel too close. They can smell your thoughts. You turn to find an old man standing there, his cloak patched with beeswax stains. He carries a smoker, a simple clay pot with a hole near the base, a wisp of fragrant smoke curling out. His eyes are the color of amber seen through old glass. You're the keeper, you say. He nods. And you're the one chasing cakes through rainstorms. Come to learn how they sweeten the soul, have you? You smile. Something like that. He gestures for you to follow. His walk is slow, but steady, and he hums the same tune the hearth mistress did earlier. You notice that bees seem to hover around him but never sting, like little golden guardians. He leads you to a low structure near the edge of the woods. Rows of skeps stand there, each with its own small cross carved above the entrance hole. Some are humming softly, others silent. The air smells of wax, smoke, and a sweetness too pure to be sugar. He crouches beside one. This hive is nearly 10 summers old. Strong, loyal, stubborn as kings. They've seen winters that broke wiser folk. He pauses, rests his hand lightly on the straw. You can feel their hum in your bones if you're still enough. You try it. For a moment, nothing. Then, there it is. A low vibration, deep and steady, running up through the ground, through your knees, into your chest. You feel absurdly close to crying. Most folk think bees only work for honey, the old man murmurs. But they keep time, too. They know the turn of seasons before we do. I swear they whisper it to the flowers. That sounds like poetry. He grins. All good history does. You laugh softly, then ask, did they really use honey in everything? Even sacrifices? He gives you a long look. Historians still argue whether those rites were real or just metaphors, he says. But if they were, the bees forgave us for it. They always do. He opens a small clay jar and shows you the thick, amber treasure inside. This, he says, is spring honey. Pale and sharp. Good for cakes that wake the tongue. But autumn honey, that's darker, slower. That's the kind you give to ghosts. You blink. Ghosts. He chuckles. Don't look so worried. The dead have sweet teeth too. You think those cakes are for the living alone. You watch as he dips his finger in the honey and smears a little on the hive entrance. For those who built before us, he says simply. For gratitude. It's strangely moving. You mimic him, brushing a drop of honey on another skep. The bees ignore you, continuing their eternal work. Now, the old man says, if you mean to bake like our grandmothers did, you'll need this. He hands you a small pouch. Inside, it's filled with something like fine sand, sweet-smelling, warm when you touch it. What is it? Bee bread, he says. Fermented pollen. Ground fine and mixed with salt. Adds life to dough. Makes the flavor hum. You lift it to your nose. It smells of summer and stone, of warmth too deep for words. This is part of the recipe. But not written anywhere. You must learn by taste. The tongue remembers what the mind forgets. He leans closer, his tone conspiratorial. There's a reason the recipe vanished, you know. Not lost, hidden. Why hide it, you ask? He smiles faintly. Because sweetness draws hunger. The kind that never ends. Once a king demanded a honey cake every dawn. His people starved while his table glittered. The bees fled the kingdom within a week. You frown. That sounds like legend. All history starts as legend, he says. The difference is who writes it down. A bee lands on your sleeve. You freeze, half afraid to move. But it just sits there, cleaning its tiny legs with the precision of a jeweler. The old man nods approvingly. It likes you. They remember kindness. And patience. You exhale slowly, watching it lift off again, tracing a lazy circle before vanishing into sunlight. When you turn back, the old man is already walking toward the forest edge. Bring the bee bread to the hearth mistress, he calls over his shoulder. Tell her the hives approve. And don't eat it raw, unless you like hearing colors sing. You laugh uncertainly. You're joking, right? He doesn't answer. Just waves once and disappears into the trees, leaving you with the faint smell of smoke and sweetness and a pouch that hums faintly in your palm, like it's remembering its maker. The air grows very still. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmurs again. You realize the day has stretched long while you weren't watching. Evening shadows begin to lengthen across the meadow, honey dark and calm. You start back toward the village, the pouch tucked safely against your chest. The bees drift around you lazily, escorting you like tiny guards of gold. Each hum seems to whisper something just out of reach, something that sounds, impossibly, like your name. You reach the hearth mistress's house just as the sun begins to melt behind the hills, turning the world into syrupy light. Smoke curls from her chimney again, but this time it smells sharper, less bread, more purpose. The door creaks open before you can even knock. "Took you long enough," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "The bees told me you were coming." You blink. "They, what?" She gestures impatiently for you to enter. "Don't look so shocked. You met old Ealdred, didn't you? He talks to them more than people. They gossip worse than widows." You grin. "He gave me something." You hold out the small pouch. "Bee bread." Her eyes soften with raw approval. "Then you listened. Good. Most travelers just take honey and think sweetness is enough." You watch as she opens the pouch and pinches a bit between her fingers. "Still warm," she murmurs. "The hive approves indeed." She nods for you to sit. Now the second lesson begins, balance. Her table is covered this time with an array of oddities: grains, nuts, dried berries, small bundles of herbs. The smell is incredible, earthy, floral, faintly smoky. "You ever notice," she says as she arranges them, "that people chase flavor like fools chase gold? Always wanting more, richer, louder. But real sweetness," she taps the pouch, "is restraint. Honey means nothing without salt." That's tonight's historical fact. Early Saxon bakers used salt and even vinegar in small amounts to temper the richness of honey. Without balance, the cakes would cloy and burn. The recipe wasn't just for pleasure, it was for patience. You help her crush the bee bread into the flour, mixing it until your hands smell like pollen and earth. She pours in mead again, but this time only a drizzle. "Just enough to wake the dough," she says. You watch the mixture darken slightly, its texture turning smoother, more alive. "It feels warmer than before," you say. She nods. That's the bees remembering. They don't like to be left out. You're not sure whether she's joking, but you nod solemnly anyway. She laughs. "Good. You're learning the most important rule of Saxon baking. Never argue with a superstition. They're older than you are." She shows you how to shape the cakes this time, smaller, flatter, with small thumbprints in the middle. "For the honey to rest," she says. "And for the gods to look down and see their reflection." You tease. "So this is like medieval mirror glazing." She blinks. "Mirror what?" "Never mind." You smile. "A fancy thing we do centuries from now." She raises an eyebrow. "Sounds exhausting." You laugh. "It is." While the cakes rest, she begins to tell another story. "There's an old tale," she says, "about a woman who baked cakes so sweet they healed hearts. A king heard of her and demanded she bake only for him. When she refused, he sent soldiers. She vanished that night, and the next morning, every hive in his kingdom was empty." "Let me guess," you say. "Historians still argue whether that actually happened." She smirks. "Of course they do. Historians hate stories that don't end with dates. You grin. And what do you think? I think, she says, brushing flour from her hands, that bees understand loyalty better than kings ever will. The fire crackles softly as she spreads a thin layer of butter on a pan. You help place the shaped cakes in careful rows. Don't crowd them, she warns. They'll rise only if they have room to breathe. Like people. You sit nearby as the first batch begins to bake. The scent grows deeper, warm grain, caramelized honey, and something faintly wild. You could live in that smell. Outside, the evening deepens. The window glows with reflected firelight, turning the glass into liquid gold. You notice the faint hum again, not bees this time, but something subtler, as though the warmth itself is singing. The hearth mistress leans back, eyes half closed. You can hear it now, can't you? You nod slowly. It's like humming, but inside the air. That's the honey remembering what it used to be, she murmurs. Flowers, rain, sunlight, wind. All their voices melt together when you bake. That's why every cake is different, depends on the weather of its birth. It's beautiful, and a little unsettling. You can almost imagine the flowers whispering through the sweetness. You decide to lighten the mood. So, no pressure then. Just baking time and the weather's soul. She laughs, a low, warm sound. Exactly. Simple, isn't it? The cakes are done sooner than you expect. She pulls them from the oven, steam rising in lazy curls. The tops glisten where she's brushed fresh honey, forming little golden pools in each thumbprint. You take one, still too hot to hold, and break it in half. The inside gleams faintly in the firelight, dense but tender. The first bite nearly stops your breath, sweet but grounded, alive with layers. You taste salt, pollen, smoke, warmth, time. This, you murmur, this tastes like memory. She nods. Because it is. You eat slowly, the warmth filling your chest, your head, even your fingertips. It's not just flavor, it's a feeling. Like standing in sunlight after a long winter. And then you notice something strange. The room feels wider somehow, deeper. The edges blur slightly, as if the world is exhaling. The hum grows faintly louder, wrapping around you like a lullaby. You blink, dizzy. Did you put something extra in this batch? The hearth mistress smiles faintly. Only time, she says. Sometimes it bites back. You set the half-eaten cake down carefully. Bites back how? By showing you what sweetness hides. The fire seems to flicker higher at that. Shadows stretch along the beams, their shapes shifting subtly, like bees dancing. Don't be afraid, she says gently. It only happens once to those who truly listen. The air smells sweeter now, almost too sweet. You feel your heartbeat slow to the rhythm of the hum. The warmth in your chest deepens until it almost aches. Outside, the last light fades completely. The night hums like a hive. You close your eyes, and for an instant, you're not in her kitchen anymore. You're somewhere older, stone walls, flickering torches, rows of kneeling figures chanting in a language you almost understand. The scent of honey and wax is everywhere. A great bowl sits in the center, filled with golden dough. Hands, so many hands, reach toward it in prayer. You gasp and open your eyes. You're back. The fire crackles, calm as ever. The hearth mistress watches you with something between amusement and pity. You saw it, she says softly. You nod, still catching your breath. What was that? She wipes her hands. The memory of the recipe. Every true baker leaves a trace in the sweetness. You tasted theirs. You look at the half-eaten cake, suddenly reverent. And that's why you said it's dangerous. She nods once. Because now you carry it. The hum fades, leaving only the fire's sigh and your own quiet heartbeat. You realize you're trembling slightly, but smiling. Tomorrow, she says, you'll need to find where the rest of it sleeps. I can teach the hands, but not the heart. You swallow, still dazed. And where does the rest sleep? In the abbey ruins north of here, she says, as if mentioning the weather. Follow the bees. They remember the way. You look out into the night. Somewhere in the darkness, you swear you hear the faintest buzz, like distant bells. You nod slowly. At dawn, then. She smiles faintly. At dawn. Dawn arrives quietly, wrapped in mist. You wake on the hearth mistress's floor beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of ash and lavender. The fire has died to coals, glowing faintly like embers of some dream that hasn't finished burning. For a moment, you wonder whether last night really happened. If you truly saw the flickering shapes in the smoke, heard that humming chorus of bees that didn't belong to this century. But the half-eaten honey cake beside you says otherwise. It glows faintly in the pale light, as though holding a whisper of yesterday's fire. You rise slowly, stretch, and step outside. The air is cool and wet, thick with fog. The world feels muted, except for one sound, the soft, insistent buzz of bees somewhere beyond sight. They are calling, exactly as the hearth mistress said they would. She appears behind you, already dressed, sleeves rolled. You'll want a walking stick, she says, handing you one fashioned from hawthorn wood. And something for the bees to recognize you by. She dips her finger into a jar and marks a small honey streak on your forehead. There, she says. They'll know you're a guest. You raise an eyebrow. This won't attract every bee in Britain, will it? Only the polite ones, she says, grinning. You shoulder your pack, still half filled with the bee bread and the remaining cakes. What am I looking for in the ruins? She stirs the fire absently, avoiding your gaze. You'll know when you find it. Just, don't eat anything that offers itself to you. That's oddly specific. She smiles thinly. Ruins are generous places. They remember hunger. You step into the mist, her voice following like a fading spell. And remember, bees lead the way, but they don't always lead home. The path northward winds through damp grass and sleeping oaks. Each branch drips with dew like tiny glass bells. The world smells of wet earth and honeyed decay. As you walk, the buzzing grows clearer, not loud, but constant, like the low purr of a hidden river. After a while, the trees thin, revealing an old stone wall, half collapsed and wrapped in ivy. Beyond it stands what remains of an abbey, arches open to the sky, a few carved pillars stubbornly upright, a scatter of moss-covered stones marking where monks once prayed. You step carefully across the threshold, where time seems to hesitate. It's silent except for the bees. They're everywhere, drifting in lazy golden circles above the broken altar, swarming around the crumbled edges of the apse where flowers have forced their way through cracks. You kneel instinctively, not from religion but from awe. The air feels heavier here, sweet, old, humming. You can taste the centuries. That's your historical fact tonight. In early medieval England, many monasteries kept apiaries. Monks prized beeswax for candles and honey for brewing and medicine. Some abbeys recorded their yields in ledgers alongside their prayers, proof that holiness and bookkeeping weren't so far apart. You trace one of the old carvings, a cross entwined with vines. Faint traces of color remain, blue and gold pigments clinging like stubborn ghosts. Then you notice something odd near the altar, a circular depression in the floor, lined with blackened stones. An oven, perhaps, or something like it. You crouch, brushing away moss. The shape is too precise to be random. And in the center lies a faint mark carved into the stone, a bee, wings outstretched, etched with careful reverence. A soft flutter stares behind you. You turn, and nearly drop your pack. A single bee hovers inches from your face, larger than most, its body dark and gleaming, almost metallic. It moves deliberately, as if inspecting you. Hello, you whisper. It circles once, twice, then darts toward the far side of the ruins. You follow, because what else can you do? The bee leads you to a low archway, half buried under vines. Beyond it, a small room glimmers faintly with reflected light. When you duck inside, you see why. The walls are streaked with old wax, shining softly in the dawn. This must have been the monastery's candlemaker's workshop. The air smells faintly of smoke, tallow, and something older, like petrified sweetness. In the center stands a table, and on it, something unexpected. A wooden tablet, cracked but legible, carved with Old English letters. You recognize just enough to read aloud, haltingly. Give thu wylt, c'est sweet hlaf beyond hal, you murmur. If you would have the sweet loaf be whole. A recipe. Or a prayer disguised as one. The next lines are harder to decipher, but you catch fragments. Honey thrice stirred, the bread must breathe, speak thanks to the golden ones. You run your fingers over the words. The grooves are shallow, worn smooth by time. A faint golden dust clings to your skin. Then, a whisper. Not loud, just a flicker of sound, like wind curling through reeds. But it forms words. Finish it, the air seems to sigh. You blink. Finish what? The bees answer, all at once, a collective hum that vibrates through your chest. It feels like being inside a heartbeat not your own. You fumble for the pouch of bee bread, remembering the hearth mistress's warning. They remember the way. You open it. The scent floods the chamber, sweet, earthy, alive. The bees swirl faster, forming a loose spiral above the table. You don't even think, you just follow instinct. You pour a little bee bread into your palm, mix it with a drop of honey from your jar, and smear it gently into the carved bee on the wall. The reaction is instant. The buzzing deepens into a low chord, resonant enough to make the air tremble. The wax on the walls begins to glimmer, melting without heat. You step back, heart pounding. In the shimmer, something forms, an image, like a reflection in liquid gold. Women kneeling by a hearth, stirring dough with bare hands. Monks chanting softly as they pour mead into a bowl. Bees drifting overhead like sparks of light. And in the center of it all, the same circular oven. You realize with a chill that this very place, is where the first honey cakes were baked. The abbey had been built over something older, something sweet and sacred. You whisper, so this is where it began. The hum answers, almost tenderly, and where it ended. The vision fades. You find yourself alone again, though the air still quivers faintly. On the table, the carved tablet has changed. Where before the last lines were worn away, now they are clear, share, or starve with sweetness. You swallow hard, pocketing the tablet carefully. Guess that means no hoarding the recipe, you murmur. Behind you, the great bee reappears, circling once before landing on your sleeve. It lingers there for a heartbeat, then flies out into the open sky, leaving a faint trail of gold dust behind. You watch it disappear into the light, feeling the weight of centuries settle softly in your chest. For the first time, you understand what the hearth mistress meant, why the recipe was hidden, not lost. Because it was never about flavor. It was about memory, generosity, and the dangerous pull of too much beauty. You breathe deeply, the air thick with honey and history, and start back toward the village. The fog begins to lift, bees dancing like drifting stars ahead of you. And somewhere, faintly, you hear the old man's laughter echoing through the trees. By the time you reach the edge of the village again, The fog has dissolved into thin sunlight, and everything feels sharper. Every twig crack, every distant crow. You can smell the ash of morning fires and the faint tang of fermenting apples. The air hums with that in-between mood England wears so well, where one breath feels ancient and the next is impatient for spring. You find the hearth mistress crouched outside her cottage, scraping soot from an iron pan. She doesn't look surprised to see you, more like she was expecting you to walk out of the mist right on cue. "Found your abbey," you say, dropping the pack beside her. She nods without glancing up. "And?" You pull the wooden tablet from your coat, now dry and dusted faintly with gold. "It was still waiting. The bees showed me." She studies it for a long moment, running her thumb along the carved bee at the top. "They do that sometimes," she murmurs. "They remember who listens." You can tell she wants to ask what you saw, but she doesn't. Maybe she already knows. Instead, she gestures to the pan. "Help me with this. The fire won't light itself." You kneel beside her and feed kindling into the small hearth pit. "The recipe, was it really theirs? The monks?" Her mouth twitches. Historians still argue whether the recipe began in the monasteries or in the women's kitchens. Some say the monks refined it, others that they merely stole it and added Latin to make it holy. She grins faintly. "Personally, I think the truth somewhere in the dough between." The fire catches with a low sigh, curling blue smoke into the air. The smell of char and honey mingles with damp earth. She continues, "You know what happened next, don't you? When sugar arrived." You shake your head, settling onto your heels. "That's your mainstream fact for today," she says, with a wry tilt of her voice, as if she's aware she's narrating history to an audience you can't see. "Before the Normans, honey was the only sweetener most people had. Then the Crusaders came home bragging about this strange white sand that could do the same trick, but purer, stronger, more controllable." "Sugar, you say?" She nods. "A miracle and a curse. They called it sweet salt at first. Some thought it was holy. Others said it was a sorcerer's trick, because it didn't spoil like honey. And once people had it, they started forgetting what patience tasted like." You glance at the tablet in your lap. The bees lost their worshippers. She shrugs. "Not lost. Just ignored. Like old gods who stopped demanding altars." A long silence stretches. Then you ask, "So what happened to the recipe?" Her eyes flick to the horizon, where the sun glints off the village roofs. "It faded. The ingredients changed. The hands that made it grew different. Sugar crept into everything. Honey cakes became tea cakes, sponge cakes, wedding cakes, each a little paler, a little sweeter, but somehow emptier too." You poke at the fire, watching sparks leap like fireflies. "And the abbey?" "Burned. Or blessed, depending on which priest you ask." She leans closer, lowering her voice. "There are stories of monks baking one final batch before the flames came. They say they hid something in the dough. A sigil, or a message. Or maybe the last of that lost spice you smelled out there. Historians still argue whether any of that's true, I suppose." She smirks. "Naturally. They always do. But you've been near enough to the truth to know why it doesn't matter much." She stands, brushes ash from her hands, and gestures to the pan. "Come on, then. Let's make our own. The proper way, before sugar ruined the world." You blink. "Now." She grins. "When better? You've got the tablet, I've got fire. We'll call it research." So you gather what's needed: rough ground barley flour from a sack, eggs from a clay pot, a cup of thick wild honey darker than molasses. She throws in a pinch of something sharp and resinous from a pouch you can't identify, perhaps that rumored lost spice, though she won't say. You mix it with your hands, the dough dense and sticky, the air thick with scent. She tells you to stir until the bees would approve, which you take to mean forever. You laugh, your arms aching. What if they are picky? They always are, she says, smiling sideways. But they are forgiving too. When the dough is ready, you shape small discs and lay them on a flat stone near the fire. The heat licks upward, and soon the cakes begin to swell slightly, their surfaces turning glossy. For a moment, it feels like time stops. The world narrows to that circle of warmth, to the slow caramelizing scent that bridges centuries. You can almost hear chanting again, soft, wordless, like an echo rising from beneath the earth. That's it, she whispers. You hear them too, don't you? You nod slowly. The bees, the monks, the mothers, all their hands stirring, folding, shaping, laid across time. And then, a laugh bubbles out of you. You know, if any food historians heard us right now, they'd call this delusion. Good, she says, snatching one cake and breaking it in half. Let them argue. It keeps them busy. She hands you a piece. Steam curls from it, and you bite in. The taste is startlingly deep, floral, smoky, slightly bitter at the edge. Not perfect. Not polished. Alive. It hits you that this might be the closest anyone's come to the original in 1,000 years. You chew slowly, savoring it. You could sell this, you joke. Saxon street food. Medieval fusion. She rolls her eyes. We've ruined enough things by selling them. A log shifts in the fire, sending a burst of sparks skyward. For a heartbeat, you see shapes in the smoke again, bees, or maybe letters forming and dissolving too quickly to read. Do you think it's really gone? You ask. The true recipe. She looks into the flames for a long while before answering. Gone, no. Sleeping, maybe. Recipes don't die, they just wait for hungry people with good hearts and bad patience. You laugh softly. I might qualify. I know, she says, smiling. That's why the bees found you. The fire crackles on, and above the cottage, a few golden dots drift lazily through the air. The scent of honey clings to your clothes and hair. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, thin, metallic, reminding you that time still marches even when you'd rather it didn't. You stare at the tablet again. The final line, share, or starve with sweetness, glows faintly in the firelight. You look up at her. What happens if someone tries to keep it for themselves? Her expression hardens, almost sorrowful. Then the honey turns to ash. Every time. The breeze stirs, carrying the scent of flowers from the fields. Bees gather on the window ledge, drawn to the warmth. You imagine them as little archivists of the past, guardians of the one secret humans never quite deserved. And as the sun dips lower, you realize that this isn't an ending at all, just another chapter in the strange, sticky chronicle of sweetness. Evening slips across the village like a slow-spilled cup of ink. The hearth mistress hums as she tidies the last crumbs from the table, the sound soft and tuneless, half lullaby, half warning. You sit back, belly pleasantly heavy, tongue still buzzing faintly from the heat of the spiced honey cake. Outside, the bees are quiet now, tucked into their wooden hives. You should feel satisfied. But the tablet on the hearthstone catches your eye again, that carved bee gleaming faintly in the flicker of the coals. You can't shake the feeling that it hasn't finished speaking. The hearth mistress notices your gaze. You're not done wandering, are you? She says, almost fondly. You shake your head. There's more out there. I can feel it. She sighs. There's always more. But if you're going north, to the abbey ruins, you'll want this. She reaches beneath the bench and hands you a small lantern made of thin horn panels and bound with copper wire. The light inside isn't fire. It's a glow, golden and steady, as if captured from the hive itself. What is it? You ask. Wax flame, she says. Bones from memory, not oil. Don't let it go out. You thank her, sling your pack, and step into the dark again. The road north feels older at night. Stones glimmer faintly with dew, and the trees hunch inward, their branches clasping like gossiping monks. The lantern throws soft amber circles on the path, just enough to see where your boots land. You pass the meadows, the silent mill, the crooked bridge. Then the ground begins to rise. The air changes too, colder, tinged with a faint sweetness, like honey left too long in a cold pantry. At the crest of the hill, you see it. The ruins again, though this time they seem less abandoned. Shadows shift within the broken arches. There's movement, small, flickering. You tighten your grip on the lantern and step closer. As you near the old altar, you hear it, soft chanting. Male voices, low and even, echoing in the hollow air. But they don't sound entirely alive. It's the sound of breath remembered, not drawn. You pause, pulse quickening. Just the wind, you mutter. The wind, after all, is famous for getting dramatic in old churches. Still, you follow the sound deeper into the nave, past the scattered stones. And there, in the dim light, you see them, figures in worn habits, faces shadowed, hands moving rhythmically over a long wooden table. The air smells thick with beeswax and smoke. One monk turns, his cowl falling back. His face is pale, his eyes bright as candle flame. You came, he says softly, as if you've just kept a long-standing appointment. You open your mouth, but words refuse to form. We've been waiting, another murmurs. The last recipe was not finished. Your mind scrambles for logic, sleep deprivation, bad mead, collective hallucination, but none of it sticks. You, monks, were, says the first. Once. Now, memory. You take a hesitant step closer. And the recipe. He gestures to the table. Laid out there are the familiar shapes. Bowls of coarse flour, jugs of mead, jars of honey. But there's something else too. Small clay pots filled with what looks like gold dust. Spice, one whispers. Brought from the far sands by traders who vanished before they could name it. That's the one historians still argue about, isn't it? You manage. The lost flavor. Historians, the monk says with a faint smile, argue because they hunger without tasting. You can't help it, you laugh, the sound shaky but real. That's one way to put it. The monk inclines his head toward the lantern. You carry the wax flame. Then you may mix. You look at the ingredients, unsure what to do. Mix what? The last cake, he says simply. For remembrance. There's something so calm in his tone that your body moves before your brain can argue. You roll up your sleeves, reach for the bowl, and begin to stir. The flour feels coarse, the honey thick as sap. The monks hum softly, their voices weaving through the air like smoke. When you reach for the golden spice, your hand trembles. The scent is indescribable, somewhere between burnt sugar and wildflowers and lightning. It doesn't smell edible, not really, but you sprinkle it in anyway. The dough darkens slightly, glistening under the lantern's light. It seems to pulse, just once, like a heartbeat. You glance up. This feels dangerous. Everything sweet is, one monk says. It's why humans love it. They guide you to shape the dough into a circle, then place it on the old stone at the center of the floor, the same one you saw earlier, with the carved bee in its heart. Light it, says the first monk. You crouch, lift the lantern, and tilt it forward until a drop of glowing wax lands on the dough. It sizzles, not burning, but sparking softly, as if awakening something. The monks begin to chant faster now, their voices rising, swirling like wind through leaves. The golden dust lifts from the dough, spiraling upward. You take a step back. Okay, I think we've achieved peak spooky baking show. No one laughs. The air thickens. The ruin seems to breathe. Then, with a faint pop, the light flares, and suddenly, the monks are gone. The table, the bowls, the jars, all gone. Only the stone remains, still faintly warm beneath your hands. In its center lies a single honey cake, perfect and whole, steam curling like a sigh. You stare, heart hammering. The scent fills the ruin, deep, intoxicating, impossible. You reach out, then hesitate. Somewhere behind you, the bees begin to hum again. You glance over your shoulder, half expecting to see them forming shapes in the air. But the space is empty, just moonlight and shadow. Your hand closes around the cake. It's warm, soft, alive. You whisper, for remembrance. The first bite is, well, words fail. Sweet, yes, but also bright, like sunlight distilled. It tastes like old laughter, and burned fields, and mornings you've forgotten you loved. You almost weep. Then, faintly, you hear it, a whisper curling through the night air. Share, or starve. You look down, and the cake is already crumbling into golden dust, slipping through your fingers. You try to catch it, but it dissolves, vanishing into the wind. And in that moment, you understand, the recipe was never meant to be kept. It only exists when shared, when hands and hearts work together. Alone, it fades. The bees hum louder, circling once before disappearing into the trees. The ruin falls silent again. You exhale shakily. Well, you murmur, that's one way to get a Michelin star. You pocket a small fragment that remains, a single grain of sweetness, glimmering faintly, and start back down the hill. Behind you, the abbey glows softly for a moment, as if the past itself has exhaled in relief. The path home feels lighter now. The bees don't follow this time. They don't need to. They've done their work. You wake the next morning unsure whether anything that happened was real. The sunlight streaming through the shutters is ordinary, unspectacular, no golden bees, no spectral chanting monks. Just morning. You half expect to find crumbs of that miraculous cake in your pack, but there's nothing. Only the faint, comforting scent of honey clinging to your clothes, like a memory that refuses to wash out. Outside, the village hums with life. A blacksmith hammers, hens gossip in the yard, and somewhere a dog barks with the serious conviction of one who believes the world needs protecting from passing clouds. You stretch, yawn, and wonder how to explain any of this to a modern historian without sounding like you need professional help. That thought lodges in your mind. A historian. Someone who studies traces of what once was. Maybe that's what you need now, not to prove the magic, but to find the fingerprints it left behind. So you follow a river road toward the nearest town, guided by instinct and caffeine withdrawal. After a long walk, you find it. A museum built over the site of an old abbey excavation. The sign outside reads Anglo-Saxon Domestic Finds, Kitchen and Hearth Exhibit. You laugh out loud. Of course, you mutter. Right on schedule. Inside, it's all glass cases and quiet air. The smell of dust and old paper hits you, the sacred incense of academia. You wander between displays, corroded cooking pots, bone-handled knives, the blackened remains of hearthstones. There's even a wax model of a Saxon baker, grimly heroic in his tunic and soot. A curator spots you hovering near a case labeled bread molds, 10th to 11th century. She's young, sharp-eyed, with a badge that reads Dr. L. Kerwin, archaeologist. "You look like you've just found Atlantis," she says. You grin. "Close enough. I'm chasing a rumor about honey cakes." She laughs. "Ah, the Saxon sweet loaf. Everyone wants that recipe. The museum gift shop sells 3 different versions of it, none of them authentic, of course." You raise an eyebrow. "You're sure about that?" She crosses her arms, mock stern. Historians still argue whether the recipe ever existed in the form people imagine. The lost part is mostly marketing. What we do have are burnt residues, charred grains, traces of pollen. The rest is guesswork. You lean closer to the display. Inside, among the fragments, is something that makes your breath catch. A small piece of carved stone, circular, etched with a faint image. You recognize it instantly, a bee, wings outstretched. "Where did that come from?" you ask quietly. She glances at the label. "That one's curious. It was found near Ely Abbey, sealed in the foundation of a later Norman structure. Likely a reused decorative piece, though some think it marked a baker's hearth." You stare, heartbeat quickening. Ely Abbey, the same region as the ruins you visited. You can almost feel the hum of bees again, faint but insistent. "Do you mind if I?" You gesture toward the glass. She shakes her head gently. "Sorry. The alarms are touchy. But you can look as long as you like." You bend close. The carving seems to shimmer faintly in the museum light, though it might just be your imagination. The lines are unmistakable, the same bee, the same circular border. You press your palm lightly against the glass. The temperature feels warmer there, almost pulsing. "Are you feeling all right?" Dr. Kerwin asks. "Fine," you say too quickly. Then, because honesty seems safer than sanity, you add, "I think I've seen that carving before. In the ruins near the fens." She perks up immediately. "You've been to those? They're technically off limits. The ground's unstable." "Yeah," you say slowly, "so I gathered. But, did anyone ever report strange lights there?" She gives you the look scientists reserve for UFO witnesses and crystal healers. "You mean atmospheric phenomena?" "Let's call it that." She hesitates, then leans in slightly. "Off the record? One of our field teams did mention flickering light in the Nave area last spring. Thought it was foxfire, bioluminescent fungi reacting to moisture. But it didn't photograph." You can't help smiling. "Foxfire, right. That explains everything." She eyes you curiously. "You sound like someone who's been chasing myths." "Maybe," you admit. "But sometimes myths leave crumbs." She chuckles. "You get along with my colleague in the archives. He insists that early English recipes were encoded prayers, rituals of gratitude disguised as cooking instructions." "That doesn't sound so far-fetched," you say, thinking of the carved words you traced with your fingers in the abbey. She tilts her head. "You really believe there's something more to it?" You consider the question. "I think people don't put that much love into food unless they're trying to talk to something bigger than themselves." She smiles faintly, as if she'd expected you to say exactly that. "Well," she says, "if you ever find your mythical honey cake, bring it here. I'll carbon date it for you." You laugh. "Deal. But you might have trouble with the magic." As she walks away, you linger a moment longer by the glass. The carved bee glows in the light, steady, patient. You can almost hear a faint hum again, so low it might just be the air vents. Still, something feels unfinished. You know now that fragments of the recipe exist, traces in stone, hints in ash, but none of it feels complete without taste. And then it hits you. Tasting is what links everything. The monks, the women, the bees. you. The recipe only lives when it's made, not when it's displayed. Some medieval English recipes were literally sung. The rhythm of the chant kept time for stirring, kneading, and baking. The melody was the measure. Lose the song, and you'd lose the recipe. You stand there for a while, letting the thought settle. Maybe the lost flavor isn't in the ingredients but in the cadence, the forgotten music of making. When you finally step outside, the late afternoon sun hits you square in the eyes. The street smells of coffee and car exhaust, but somewhere beneath it, faint and stubborn, you swear you catch the scent of honey. You turn toward it instinctively, following the invisible thread down a side street until you find a small bakery with a sign that reads The Beekeeper's Daughter. Inside, the air is golden, thick with the smell of butter and bread. The woman behind the counter, middle-aged, sleeves rolled, hair pinned carelessly, looks up and smiles. You look like you've walked a long way for something sweet. You nod. You have no idea. She slides a tray forward. Try this one. It's an old family recipe. The cakes are small, round, and faintly glossy. You pick one up, feeling a tremor of recognition before the first bite. The flavor, rich, floral, and just a little smoky, hits like a memory coming home. You set it down carefully, eyes wide. Where did you get this recipe? She shrugs. My grandmother said it came from the abbey ruins. Found written on a piece of wood she was using for kindling. You almost laugh, but it comes out as a quiet sigh instead. Of course she did. The baker frowns. Why? Because, you say softly, it means the recipe was never lost. It just kept finding people who needed it. You leave a few coins, step back into the sunlight, and for the first time in days, you feel something like peace. The taste lingers, honey-sweet and ancient, humming faintly at the back of your throat. That night, back in your little rented room above the village inn, sleep refuses to come. The taste of that honey cake still clings to your tongue, familiar, impossible. You turn the fragment of carved bee in your pocket over and over, the edges worn smooth from your thumb. You know what you have to do. The thought has been building ever since the first time you stepped into those ruins. You have to try making it yourself. The decision fills you with an oddly nervous excitement, the kind you used to feel before exams or first dates. You glance out the window. The moon hangs low and golden, like a drop of honey caught in black velvet. Well, you whisper, if the monks could do this by candlelight, I can manage by moonlight. You head downstairs to the empty kitchen. The innkeeper's left a note, bread dough rising in the corner. Please don't blow anything up. A reasonable request, though you can't promise compliance. You start assembling what you need. Coarse barley flour. 2 eggs. A jug of raw honey from the pantry, still half crystallized. A pinch of salt, and your voice lowers as you pull a small pouch from your coat, the fragment of the mysterious golden spice you brushed from the tablet in the ruins. It glows faintly under the lantern light, as if aware of its importance. The inn's kitchen smells of ash, yeast, and spilled beer. You light a single candle, then dim it again, preferring the cold gleam of the moon through the window. The shadows feel friendlier that way. You begin mixing. Flour first, then honey, stirring with a wooden spoon that creaks like an old tree. You hum under your breath without realizing it, a slow, looping rhythm that matches the movement of your hands. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember that tidbit about sung recipes. You can almost hear the ghosts of those long-ago bakers keeping time. The dough comes together slowly, sticky and uneven, clinging to your fingers like it doesn't want to let go. You add the eggs, working them in with patient circles. The air thickens with scent, sweet, earthy, ancient. You pause, staring at the mixture. It looks nothing like modern batter, nothing like any cookbook would approve of. You grin. Perfect. Then comes the spice. You open the pouch carefully, pinching out just a dusting. The scent is electric, sweetness laced with something sharp, like crushed flowers after rain. You can't name it, but your whole body recognizes it somehow, like a memory your blood remembers before your brain does. You stir it in slowly, whispering the words you remember from the carved tablet. Give thu wilt se sweet hlaf beyond hal. If you would have the sweet loaf be whole. The dough sighs, actually sighs. You freeze. The air vibrates faintly, like someone plucked an invisible harp string. Then it settles again. Okay, you mutter. Noted. Less spice next time. You shape the mixture into a small round loaf and set it on a flat stone you found outside the inn earlier, blackened on one side from old fires. You slide it into the hearth, nestling it among the embers. The fire is low, just enough heat to coax rather than burn. Now comes the waiting. You sit back on your heels, watching the flickering glow. The smell deepens, warm and familiar. It smells like everything you've been chasing. Bees and bread, smoke and laughter, old kitchens and the hum of unseen prayers. Your mind drifts. You think about the monks and their arguments, the hearth mistress and her wry smile, the museum curator who didn't quite believe you but wanted to. You think about the bees, endlessly patient archivists of sweetness. Historians still argue whether early Saxon cooking was communal or solitary, whether those old recipes were guarded or shared. But sitting here, you realize the answer doesn't matter. Because right now, it feels like the whole world is helping you bake. A faint sound stirs in the corner. You look up, and there they are. Bees. Just a few at first, then a dozen, drifting lazily from the shadows. Their wings catch the candlelight like shards of amber. You blink. You're kidding. They circle the hearth, slow and steady. The sound isn't loud, it's soft, harmonic, almost human. You think you can make out a rhythm to it, like a lullaby. You smile despite yourself. Fine, you whisper. You can watch. But no judging. They hover closer as the cake begins to rise, its edges browning, the scent now intoxicating. You swear the buzzing grows in time with the crackling of the fire. Finally, when the surface turns glossy and gold, you reach in with a cloth and pull it free. It's small, humble, nothing like the shining miracles of legend, but somehow perfect. You break it open. Steam curls upward, carrying that impossible fragrance. You tear off a piece and taste it. It's not like anything you've ever eaten. The sweetness comes in waves, first soft and floral, then deep and smoky, ending in a faint, clean bitterness that makes you want to cry and laugh at once. It tastes alive. You sit there for a long moment, silent. Then you look up at the bees and say quietly, "Thank you." They hum once, a single, unanimous note, and drift upward, vanishing through the rafters. You lean back, dizzy with wonder. You could stop here. You should. But curiosity, that most human of curses, won't let you. You take the rest of the loaf, wrap it in a cloth, and step outside. The air is cool, silvered with moonlight. Down by the river, mist curls above the water like lazy smoke. You sit on the bank and take another bite, closing your eyes. And then, something shifts. The night grows heavier, more vivid. The stars blur. You're not in the present anymore. You know it without knowing how. The sounds are different. No cars, no electric hum, just wind and distant bells. You open your eyes. The river is the same, but the world around it isn't. Across the water, you see torches, and figures moving, women in linen dresses, men in rough tunics, all gathered around a great fire. They are laughing, singing, baking. And in that moment, you understand, This is time itself tasting you back. You raise the last piece of cake to your lips and whisper, "To memory." When you eat it, the vision fades like mist at sunrise. You're alone again, the modern world sliding gently back into focus. The bees are gone. The moon has climbed higher. You laugh softly, shaking your head. "All right," you murmur. "That's probably fine. Totally normal." But your hands are trembling, and your heart feels lighter than it has in years. The recipe worked, not because you followed it perfectly, but because you meant it. And that, you realize, is the real secret ingredient every scholar forgets: intention. As you walk back toward the inn, dawn just beginning to blush at the horizon, the world feels quiet and full again. You carry the smell of honey in your hair, the taste of history on your tongue, and a warmth in your chest that has nothing to do with fire. Somewhere in the distance, a single bee hums its slow, contented song. You wake to the smell of bread and the sound of laughter downstairs. For a blissful moment, you lie still, wondering if last night was just an oddly specific dream brought on by honey fumes. But then you roll over and see it, the stone you used in the hearth, sitting on the windowsill. It's still faintly warm. And beside it, a smear of golden crumbs glows in the morning light like dusted amber. Right. Not a dream. You sit up slowly, every muscle deliciously heavy from lack of sleep and the lingering hum of whatever strange alchemy you've done. The inn feels different today, softer, friendlier. Maybe it's you. Maybe the air itself has changed. Downstairs, the innkeeper looks up from pouring ale for two travelers. "You were up late," she says, half amused, half accusing. "Smelled something good burning." "Not burning," you reply, rubbing your eyes. "Just history." She snorts. "Well, tell history to clean up after itself next time." You grin, but your mind is elsewhere. The honey cake, your honey cake, worked. Not in a scientific sense. In a felt sense. You tasted something ancient, and it tasted you back. That's a hard thing to put on a resume. So you wrap the remaining half of the loaf in cloth, pack your things, and step into the cool morning. The road stretches ahead, muddy and sparkling with dew. The trees lean in as if listening. You take a bite of the leftover cake, just to be sure it's still real. It is. Softer now, faintly smoky, with a sweetness that feels earned rather than given. You smile. Walking feels easier today. Lighter. Every farmhouse chimney sends up a little ribbon of smoke, and every time you pass one, you catch yourself wondering if they, too, have an old family recipe tucked behind the flower bin, something their great-grandmother whispered and their great-granddaughter might someday rediscover. You reach a crossroads where an old oak bends toward the fields. There's a bench there, the kind travelers leave offerings on: flowers, coins, the occasional apple. You sit, unwrap the last of the cake, and break it in half. One piece you eat. The other you set carefully on the bench, for whoever, or whatever, might be listening. A breeze stirs. Somewhere behind you, a bee hums. Historians still argue whether such roadside offerings were pagan hangovers or simple gestures of luck. You decide it doesn't matter. The act itself feels right. You head toward the ruins one last time. The path is quiet except for the crunch of your boots and the soft clink of your satchel. The abbey walls rise through the mist ahead, more familiar now, almost friendly. Inside, the light pools in golden puddles through broken windows. You kneel at the spot where the carved tablet once rested and brush the stone gently. "I made it," you whisper. Or, something like it. A shaft of sunlight slides through a crack and lands on the floor beside you. You could swear it smells faintly of honey. You sit there for a while, letting the silence fill you. There's no voice, no ghostly monk, no chorus of bees, just that calm, resonant stillness of an old place finally at peace. You pull out your journal and start to write. The words come easily now. Ingredients, steps, sensations. You even sketch the honeycomb pattern that had been etched into the stone tablet. Not to prove anything, not to publish, but to remember. Your handwriting slows toward the end, and for a moment, your pen hovers. You hesitate. Because you realize something. This recipe isn't meant to be exact. It's meant to evolve, to be rediscovered again and again, slightly changed each time. That's how the sweetness survives. So you close the book without finishing the final line. A little mystery, you think, is part of the flavor. You step back outside. The day has bloomed into one of those rare English afternoons where sunlight actually feels like warmth. The fields are buzzing with life, literally. Bees drift lazily from wildflower to wildflower, tiny golden priests conducting their endless, humming liturgy. You watch one land on your sleeve. Its little legs leave specks of pollen like stardust. You grin and whisper, "Tell your ancestors I said thank you." The bee pauses, as if considering the message, then lifts off and disappears into the sky. The road home stretches before you. You think about everything you've learned, the monks, the hearth mistress, the scholars, the ghosts, the bees. You think about how the world keeps losing and finding the same flavors, the same comforts. Because really, that's what these lost recipes are, edible time machines. They don't just feed us, they remind us who we've been, and maybe who we still could be. You picture yourself back in your own kitchen, apron crooked, spoon clutched like a weapon, trying to explain to a friend why this one cake matters so much. It's not just about honey, you'll say. It's about listening to the past through your tongue. You chuckle at the thought. Pretentious, yes, but not wrong. By the time you reach the crest of the hill, the village behind you looks like something painted on parchment, flat, luminous, eternal. You stop there, turn once, and raise your hand in quiet farewell. Then, with the sun at your back and crumbs still on your fingers, you take one last bite of the cake. It tastes different again, fainter, gentler, as though it's saying goodbye. You swallow, close your eyes, and let the sweetness linger. Maybe the recipe will fade again. Maybe it'll be rediscovered 100 years from now by someone else who dreams of honey and firelight. Maybe they'll make it wrong, or better, or both. And when they do, maybe they'll taste this same moment, the hum of bees, the warmth of dawn, and the strange comfort of knowing that not everything lost stays gone forever. You brush the last crumbs from your palms and whisper, "Save some for the next traveler." The wind carries the words away, soft as breath. You reach your own door long after sunset. The world feels different, as if every shadow has a flavor now, every passing scent carries a memory. You drop your pack inside, kick off your shoes, and stand there for a moment, breathing in the ordinary air of home, faint detergent, old books, a bit of dust. It smells suddenly strange, as though the modern world is too clean, too quiet, too far from the hum of bees and the hiss of hearth fire. You place the wrapped half-loaf, the last fragment of your journey, on the counter. It's smaller now, cracked along one edge, but still golden in the lamplight. You consider saving it forever, a relic of the night you bridged centuries. But you know better. Recipes aren't meant to be mummified. They are meant to disappear into mouths and memories. You unwrap it carefully, tear off a corner, and chew. The flavor is faint now, dulled by travel and air, but underneath the softness you still taste the same heartbeat, smoke, honey, warmth. It's like hearing a lullaby from a room away. You put the rest on a plate, pour yourself tea, and sit at your desk. The lamp's glow pools across your journal, still open from the last entry. You read over the half-finished notes, the ingredients, the sketches, the translation guesses, and laugh quietly. Good enough, you murmur. The bees, the monks, the spice, it all feels like a long, sweet fever dream. Yet your fingers still smell faintly of honey. You pick up your pen. You think about the people who might find your notebook someday. Maybe a student, or a baker, or a bored traveler who likes strange bedtime stories. You imagine them trying to follow your recipe and getting it completely wrong, and somehow, exactly right. Because that's how it goes, isn't it? You never really resurrect a lost recipe. You just wake it up for a while. Historians still argue whether the Saxons truly had a dessert we'd recognize as cake. Some insist they didn't have the ingredients. Others say the surviving crumbs and residue prove otherwise. But as you sit there, licking honey from your thumb, you realize the debate misses the point. Whether or not the real Saxon honey cake existed doesn't matter. What matters is that people believed in sweetness. They sought it. That belief itself is the recipe. You close your eyes, let the tea steam rise around your face, and imagine those long-ago kitchens. Firelight glinting off bowls. Women's laughter rolling between stone walls. The steady hum of bees beyond the window. The warm, sticky promise of something good, shared by hand and heart. You smile. They'd laugh at my oven, you whisper. But maybe they'd approve of the honey. The room feels warmer now. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, all of it blends into a quiet rhythm that could almost be the drone of bees again. You reach for the last bite of the cake. It's cool, dense, faintly sweet. You take your time with it. The flavor spreads slowly, like dawn through mist. The warmth sinks through your shoulders, and you feel, finally, at rest. You lean back in your chair, eyes half closed. The world narrows to heartbeat and breath. Somewhere outside, a wind stirs through unseen trees. You think you hear a low, familiar buzzing, gentle and content. Maybe it's just the pipes. Maybe not. Either way, it soothes you. Your eyelids grow heavier. The lamplight turns soft, gold-edged, almost liquid. You could swear it ripples like honey. You whisper, barely awake now, all right. You win. Sweet dreams. And as you drift toward sleep, the last image in your mind is a single honeybee, slow and shining, circling once before vanishing into the warmth of the lamp. The hum of the world softens. The story, like the sweetness, lingers just a little longer before melting away. You feel the weight of your body ease, the breath deepening, the room around you becoming hazy and kind. Everything slows. Maybe you still smell the honey. Maybe it's only memory pretending to be scent. Either way, it's comforting, the quiet sweetness that says, you made it home. The lost recipes are never truly gone. They wait patiently, tucked between old pages, whispered through generations, hidden in the rhythms of hands that knead and stir without even realizing they remember. Somewhere tonight, someone else is mixing flour and honey, stirring by instinct, humming to themselves, never knowing they're keeping 1,000 years of warmth alive. You let that thought settle over you like a blanket. The hum fades, but not completely. It becomes the soft drone of your pulse, steady and sure. If you listen closely, you might still hear the faintest buzz, the sound of a single bee tracing slow golden circles in the dark, reminding you that sweetness, once found, never really leaves. It just changes shape, waits for the next quiet heart to notice. So breathe in. Let go. You've followed the crumbs all the way back to yourself. The story ends where it began, in the scent of honey, the warmth of the hearth, and the hush between waking and sleep. Rest now. The sweetness will keep.